What? Okay, so we have two new trades to talk about. One makes quite a bit of sense for both sides. The other is, well, one involving the Vancouver Canucks. But we're going to be breaking down both trades in detail with all the news, so make sure you watch till the end and subscribe if you're new for more trade content just like this. Now, I first want to start with one trade here in the Shayne Gostisbehere trade. This deal will be a lot less time to explain than the other one, so we're going to start with this one. With Shayne Gostisbehere, we've been talking about him for a little while now as a really interesting trade target piece. In 52 games so far of Arizona, he has 10 goals, 21 assists for 31 points. And although Gostisbehere is never going to be elite defensively, he's had a really solid year for Arizona and offensively can do a lot, especially on the power play. And the Carolina Hurricanes are the team to end up going after him. We see this tweet here by Elliotte Friedman, Shayne Gostisbehere going to Carolina for a third-round pick. And then he goes on to say that's in 2026. So it's a third-round pick that likely isn't to be all too great, more like a fourth-round pick. It's a late third, pretty much. Not just this year, but all the way in 2026 for a player that I think could be pretty valuable in an offensive role. And if he's sheltered right, especially in Carolina, which I think would be easier to do, then to me, I think Gostisbehere is a pretty great fit. We also heard some rumblings that they were going after Jacob Chychrun, but obviously, especially what we see in this trade, Shayne Gostisbehere costs a lot less. Making $4.5 million for this year and being a rental afterwards, he likely wasn't going to be re-signing in Arizona either. And even though this might be a little bit of an underwhelming price on paper, still, I mean, the Coyotes do get a third-round pick, so it could be worse. And I think for Arizona as well, they're fine with waiting a little bit longer for these picks. And even though it's in 2026, I think they'll still take it. Again, if they were going to get a better price, it probably would have happened. But it's actually interesting to think about where he could actually play, because although he could play both left side and right, he's been playing on that right side for Arizona this year, and I'm not sure if they take Jalen Chatfield out of the lineup. He's been really effective in those bottom pair minutes, so maybe it's on that third pair of Calvin DeHaan. Maybe he's taken out and taken as the seventh defenseman. And then we look as well towards the power play units and what it looks like on the defensive side of things. You see on the first pairing, you got Brady Shea on the left side, and then on the second power play unit, you got Brent Burns on that left side too. So I would imagine maybe he replaces Shea on the first pair. I don't know if they take Burns out of the power play. So it'll be an interesting fit in Carolina, and if he's just using a pure offensive role, then I think it's pretty sound. You got players like Slavin that can obviously defend extremely well. So again, if he's shelter on the right pair, I could see him doing pretty solidly. And I mean, hey, the Canes need finishing, and he has 10 goals this year, so maybe they plan to use that in a way. But let's be honest, that's probably not the trade you're coming to see my thoughts on. You're probably thinking about this Filip Hronek trade, which just came out of nowhere. I mean, I didn't really think that we had many rumors surrounding Hronek at all. And there was a little bit about maybe Vancouver going after a defenseman or something, but not to this extent. And you see when the Vancouver Canucks, they announced a big trade with both Detroit and Vancouver, and it goes as follows. For the Canucks, they get Filip Hronek and a 2023 fourth-round pick. In exchange, the Red Wings get a conditional first-round pick, though basically the conditions and the first-round pick from the New York Islanders that was received in the Horvat trade, and a 2023 second-rounder. But as we know with that pick, of course, it's top 10 protected, but that wouldn't stop the Detroit Red Wings now from potentially getting maybe an 11 to 16 pick if the New York Islanders miss the playoffs, and that would be quite interesting to see. Of course, the Islanders right now in 64 games have 70 points, and they're in a playoff spot, but you also see teams like the Sabres and even the Panthers being around that range with less games played, especially the Sabres, if they hadn't really been bad these past few games, have had a great opportunity to reach that spot. So even though the Islanders are still likely to make the playoffs, if they don't, now it's the Red Wings being the big beneficiary out of that. But this is a wild trade that really caught me off guard. I mean, for Detroit, Hronek's right now signed for $4.4 million for this year and next. He'd be an RFA afterwards, so I don't know if there was really much of a discussion over whether they'd be able to re-sign him. I thought that maybe his future in Detroit would be fine, especially with how well he's played this year, even though recently, especially in the dual series versus Ottawa, he got burned quite a few times. He's still had the best season of his career, for sure, and especially earlier in the season, there was a bit of buzz over some Norris talk, and even though I don't think he was ever going to be in the top 3 conversation, he was around there and starting to pick up a lot of steam for just how much offense he was producing for Detroit, as well as getting much better defensively. And even though right now I think if he continues what he's done in Detroit, I think he'd be a great player for the Canucks. It's really interesting to see Vancouver go in this direction. The Canucks, before the Horvat trade, were faced with a really tough decision. Do they trade Horvat and start to go more in a rebuilding direction, start to offload guys? Or do they continue still trying to be a contending team, especially for this next year. They traded Bo Horvat, now they traded Luke Schenn, but now they've gone after Filip Hronek, and it's quite fascinating. Of course, they still have their own first-round picks, so if they continue to slide, they'll still have that potentially top 10 pick. But I think Hronek makes them a lot better for right now and maybe puts them more in the 10 range in a really, really stacked draft that they could really use a top 5 pick for. Their prospect pool is really depleted right now and underratedly, I think, one of the worst in the NHL. And I think the Canucks could really use another couple of top 15, top 20 picks. But if Vancouver still try to compete like this, it kind of makes the vision a little bit blurrier. And I think they had a real opportunity to truly reload that prospect pool in the 2023 draft, not just with their own pick, but of course with the Islanders pick. And they don't just give up a first round pick, they give up a second round pick on top of things. Even though they do at a fourth, it's not really going to make much of a difference. This draft is amazing at the top end and even in the first couple of rounds. And I think for Vancouver, this was a real opportunity to just kind of retool for a little bit. Just have a little bit of a breath here and hopefully in the offseason get a couple of additions to maybe reload back in the 2024 season. But it's obvious they don't want to wait that long. But I think for the Detroit Red Wings, this is another, again, really fascinating decision by them because for Hronek, he's been unbelievable this season. And there's not really that much debate right now over whether he would re-sign or any controversy around a future contract after this year. He's signed still for next season and would be an RFA with those rights. And he's been easily one of the best players on the Detroit Red Wings this year and so valuable for that defense. Obviously, this move kind of takes them out of the playoff race, I'd assume, especially after 2 brutal losses to the Ottawa Senators. But this is a situation where for Detroit, you kind of also might just want to take it. Again, it's a first-round pick that could be top 15 and a 2023 second-round pick. I mean, for a player of Hronek's caliber, if he's able to continue playing this well, then sure, I could see it being worth for Vancouver. But if this is just a career season out of Hronek, then to me, this package is pretty excellent for Detroit. But this is still a wild and wacky trade. As of right now, I say Detroit wins this deal just from a pure outside perspective. But again, if Hronek does still continue to play well in Vancouver's system and does kind of carry the load a little bit defensively there, and especially next year does play a part, then I could see the Canucks winning this trade by a decent bit. But it just depends on that. It also depends on if Hronek's maybe bad enough this last few games to hopefully get a better pick for the Canucks, because that to me should be the number one priority right now. Even though you bring on a player of this caliber, losing, I mean, this Canucks team, it's not going to do anything. You're not going to make the playoffs with this Canucks roster this year. You just need to kind of give up, and they've already done a pretty good job of that, in my opinion. But this retoolment and this just consistent lack of ever trying to retool or rebuild or do any of those re's besides reload is a little bit concerning for Vancouver. But again, if they're trying to contend now, I could kind of see where they're going for. But again, just the timing of it is just really weird to me. If this was an offseason trade, sure, why not if you're Vancouver? But when you're trying to lose as many games as you can, it's just an interesting decision for them. But I really want to know your guys' thoughts on this deal, because I feel like I'm going to be thinking about this one for weeks and weeks and weeks and years and decades at this point, because it's just so wild to think about. But let me know what you guys think about both the Gostisbehere and the Filip Hronek deals, and which teams you think win these trades as well. Let us know down below. Of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, comment all your thoughts, and of course, make sure you click this card for all my hockey trade talk right in one playlist. My name is Nathan, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.